Gabe, what a tremendous series of articles that you have written. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me.
You bet. Okay, so explain what you have uncovered and why it's important.
We essentially unpacked in a multi-part series that we are still working on about how essentially these organizations, particularly we highlighted a group called the Global Disinformation Index, and these organizations are feeding secret blacklists to advertising companies with the intent of shutting down and defunding disfavored speech, in this case, certainly conservative media. And so we actually learned that the Washington Examiner, among other outlets, is on this blacklist, and that this process is playing a very major role in how media outlets are gaining access to advertising dollars. The second part of our series, sort of the most important part of this, I think, is that the United States government has funded the disinformation tracking organization that is, as we said, openly taking steps to defund and deplatform disfavored speech, certainly raising First Amendment issues.
Okay, well, hang on just a sec. First, Global Disinformation Index sounds very official. Who is this group?
Yes. So the Global Disinformation Index is a British organization that is two affiliated American nonprofit organizations that have both been reaping hundreds of thousands of dollars kind of as this disinformation tracking space accelerates. And so Global Disinformation Index, they compile a secret dynamic exclusion list, essentially a blacklist. And this list compiles groups that they determine to be peddling alleged disinformation. So this organization has said publicly that the outlets that it deems the riskiest are outlets like the American Spectator, the American Conservative, the Daily Wire, the Blaze, Newsmax, and several other outlets. And so their blacklist separately is something that they provide to advertising companies like the Microsoft-owned Xandr, in order for those advertising companies to have insight into the outlets that they should allegedly deplatform and defund.
And what gives these people the expertise to make that determination?
Great question. That's obviously a question on a lot of people's minds, certainly, Glenn. These organizations are heavily staffed with they're oversaw by people, university professors, writers, and journalists. One individual on the board of the Global Disinformation Index is Ann Applebaum, a left-wing journalist who notably discredited the Hunter Biden laptop story. Other individuals are involved with groups like the Pew Research Center, the Open Society Foundation, and NVIDIA, notably.
Yeah. Okay. So they're going around, and I mean, this is something that Media Matters was doing, and really, despite what is said in the papers, quite ineffectively with me when I was on just radio and Fox. And they would target and target and target and target. But now you're looking really at Google and Amazon as the big advertisers, and they're targeting all of these agencies, if you will, that are really media platforms. Correct? That's
right. A group like this, which obviously, has certainly flown under the radar, has developed major influence clearly in the advertising space based on the fact that Microsoft, we learned, was subscribing to this list. Microsoft, obviously one of the largest corporations throughout the world.
I'm just looking at the review of the Huffington Post. This is their risk level is low, so feel free to advertise. The Huffington Post largely features fact-based, unbiased content, free of sensational text or visuals. The domain also refrained from perpetuating divisive narratives via the negative targeting of groups or individuals, unless you're conservative or Republican. The outlet scores for the operations pillar indicators are imperfect, but it is better than most. Wow. So that's good.
Yeah, and what I would like to flag, Glenn, is that the organizations, the news outlets that the Global Disinformation Index ranks as the 10 least riskiest, they all skew to the left, notably, except the Wall Street Journal, but notably they flag Huffington Post, now HuffPost, and BuzzFeed News as allegedly the 10 riskiest outlets. As your listeners may remember, these are two media outlets that heavily peddled the Steele dossier that intended to link Donald Trump to Russia. They also peddled the false notion that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. These are two very problematic, legitimate disinformation campaigns that seeped into the American consciousness.
Well, and I don't think people understand. The Wall Street Journal is actually used to be, I don't know if it is anymore, it used to be more liberal in its news pages than the New York Times. But because of the editorial section being so conservative, it just kind of got this rap that it wasn't. But it's a very liberal newspaper when it comes to the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and what we tried to highlight again is the fact that the 10 allegedly least risky outlets, that certainly is problematic given the stories that they've promoted in the past. Whereas when you look at the outlets labeled the riskiest, outlets essentially like the Washington Examiner or the Blaze, these are outlets that actually were right on this material first. The Washington Examiner verified the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop, and so did several other outlets long before legacy media actually took an honest attempt to take a look at that information.
It's funny because I don't see any. On the riskiest domains or apps, I don't see a single liberal on here, and I see almost every single conservative. It's quite a list. Can we go back to now where the government is funding? Because even our State Department is funding this.
That's right. The State Department has granted $330,000 to the Global Disinformation Index through two specific entities. One, the Global Engagement Center, which is essentially a grant-making arm through the State Department that actually came under fire in Twitter files reported by journalist Matt Taibbi, because that same organization was contacting Twitter and asking them to engage in content moderation related to the coronavirus and vaccines in particular in 2020. So that's one entity that has funded the Global Disinformation Index. The other State Department entity is the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a nonprofit group that was authorized through Congress, that is funded almost entirely through congressional appropriations. And I would really flag that the board of the National Endowment for Democracy has oversight over who receives grants. And their Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Republican, a staunch Trump advocate, and aligned with former President Donald Trump, she sits on the board of that organization.
It's quite a mess. How is this going to be cleaned up?
So we've received word from a few members of Congress who have said this raises major issues and they would hope to investigate this. One is Representative Michael McCaul, who is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which oversees grants to the State Department. Another is Representative Jim Banks of Indiana, who has been a staunch advocate for First Amendment and anti-censorship operations. But certainly, a lot of Americans are hoping that members of Congress can take adequate steps to investigate this situation, in particular because this really feeds into a lot that was revealed with the Twitter files between public and private partnerships. And I think that does raise a lot of concerns with American voters.
Gabe, I thank you for exposing this and all the work you guys do at the Examiner. You're a really reputable site, and you do a lot of great work. So thank you. Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you very much, Glenn.
You bet. Bye-bye.